Hi everybody, welcome to week 7. We're about 40% of the way through the semester right now, so we're making great progress. And this week we're going to talk about mission statements and what they are and how we can start developing them. Well, as I customarily have done, I just want to review where we are at. And I've done this a couple of times, but I think it's important to review. And so what we've said is that strategic planning is an exercise in organizational self-discovery. And to do that, we had to find things out about the organization. First of all, we talked about mandates, which are those things that the organization must do. And then we talked about stakeholders, which is the group of people or group of other organizations that have a claim on our organization. And then we talked about understanding the internal and external environment in which the organization operates. And we did that by looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. And this past week, you all worked on developing a list of questions that you want to ask the person at your organization whom you're interviewing. And just the development of that question, that list of questions, gets you in the mindset of understanding the organization. And what else do you want to understand about the organization? And so now this week, just for a little more understanding, we're going to talk about what do we do as an organization, and that is your mission statement. And what do we want to be, which is your vision statement. And now we're going to talk a lot more about mission statements than vision statements, but particularly in the Bryson and Alston text, vision statements are discussed in the reading. So here's our plan for week 7. I want you to get in the Bryson and Alston text and look at pages 1 through 108 through about 118. And you'll see that is a series of worksheets. Worksheets that you can use actually, in fact, all of this Bryson and Alston text has a lot of useful worksheets that I think for a lot of you will really come in handy as you develop your term projects. So keep that in mind. But this week in particular, we're going to use worksheet 24 when we come to the discussion board. We're going to use part of it. And then I've given you on the Blackboard site an excerpt of Bryson 2011, chapter 4, which is an excerpt on the mission statement. And then, like last week, I introduced you to Jen Lockman. And this week on the Blackboard site, you'll see I redirect you to her YouTube site. I want you to review videos 1 and 2. If you watched all of Jen's videos last week, that's fine. But in videos 1 and 2, she talks about visioning. And I kind of want that to be in the back of your mind. And then I've given you some resources from an organization called the Nonprofit Hub. I provide a link to their website, and I also give you a very short article that I found on their website that talks about mission statements, and it's really interesting to contrast that with Bryson. And then finally, the subject matter for our discussion board this week is going to be a local nonprofit in Omaha called the Durham Museum. So with all that as background, we're going to use our discussion board time in letting you act as if you're a member of the Durham Museum, and you're going to write an official mission statement. This is a definition that I give you in the excerpted chapter from Bryson, where he says, a mission statement is a declaration of organizational purpose. Mission statements vary in length depending on their intended use, but they are typically short, no more than a page, and often not more than a punchy slogan. They should also be targeted, activist in tone, and inspiring. And they should lead to measures that will indicate whether or not the mission is being achieved. Well, let's break that down a little bit into what I think are some key statements that Bryson includes in there. First of all, he says that a mission statement is a declaration of organizational purpose. Next, he says they vary in length, but he says they are typically short. And then he says a mission statement should be targeted, activist in tone, and inspiring. And that finally, this mission statement should lead to measures that help you understand whether or not the mission is being achieved. So breaking that down even further, Bryson talks about this declaration of organizational purpose. And so that word declaration is different than just saying something. A declaration is an affirmative and unambiguous statement. There should be no confusion. So, in our American history, the Declaration of Independence was a declaration to King George III that the American colonies said they were independent states. There was no ambiguity about that. So a declaration is affirmative and unambiguous. Excuse me. And the organizational purpose really is just why we are here. So, for example, the food bank hopes to end world hunger, which is kind of broad. Or the food bank's mission is to provide food for those in need in this city. So you see, those are two different kinds of statements. The first one is a little bit ambiguous, right? I mean, no food bank is going to end world hunger. The second one is a little more refined, and it's more declarative about the organizational purpose. The next thing that Bryson says is that a mission statement should be typically short. You noticed in Bryson's definition, he said no more than a page. However, I provided you this article by Mark Koenig on the Nonprofit Hub. He has some different ideas about mission statement. He'd like it to be a lot shorter than a page, for example. And he talks about good examples and bad examples of mission statements. So kind of compare what Koenig has to say with what Bryson has to say. And then next, Bryson says it should be targeted. In other words, it applies to a specific clientele, geographic group, or the like. So in other words, like my food bank example, one food bank is not going to end world hunger, right? So if I have a food bank in Council Bluffs, Iowa, I should target my population towards Council Bluffs or the immediate area. Then next, Bryson says that a mission statement should be activist in tone. Well, I mean, people misunderstand the word activist sometimes. They think of an activist as a rabble-rouser or somebody who's trying to upset the apple cart, so to speak. But Bryson's using the term activist in its purest sense, which is there's definitive social activity that this organization has to do. What is that? Next, he says it should be inspiring. Well, now we're starting to talk about writing, aren't we? And how do you inspire people with a mission statement? I can't really tell you that. And this is why working on mission statements is something that within your organization should be done corporately with members of your organization. Because the more people you have involved in the process, often the more you're going to be able to come up with those inspiring statements. And then finally, it should lead to measures of success, which means that your mission statement should enable you to build specific goals, achievable goals, and indicators that you can use to actually compare yourself with a year ago, or compare yourself with 5 years ago, or compare yourself with other organizations. Now, Bryson, in this excerpted reading I gave you, he asks 6 questions. And these 6 questions should also help you think about what is our mission. Now, right here, let me just pause for a second. You remember right at the first slide this week, I said, remember we talked about mandates and we talked about stakeholders and we talked about the environment. Look at these 6 questions here. Really, for the most part, these 6 questions refer to those kinds of things. So again, it's really hard for an organization to start coming up with a strategic plan or even a mission statement if they don't take the time to understand the foundations, such as their mandates, their stakeholders, and their environment. You know, I've done strategic planning with my colleagues in various organizations, and lots of times people want to start out with the mission statement. They just want to say, hey, what's our mission? What's our vision? Let's get this down on paper. But how can you do that unless you answer some questions about it first? So Bryson provides us these 6 questions. Who are we? Right? That talks about the values of the organization. Second, what are the basic social and political needs we exist to meet? Third, how do we plan to recognize, anticipate, and respond to those needs? Fourth, how do we respond to key stakeholders? So there we are with stakeholders. Who are they? What are our philosophy, values, and culture? You know, what are our goals? And what makes us distinctive or unique? In other words, do we have a niche that only we can fill? Okay, so I provided you the Bryson reading, and I also provided this Mark Koenig article. I think it's a great article because it's very short, and he has a lot to say about what he thinks are good and bad mission statements. So take the time to read that. And then the second thing is, I already talked about Jen Lockman's videos. So look at her videos and then look at some of the worksheets that she talks about. I don't have you do Jen Lockman's worksheets. They're kind of tricky to do as an academic exercise. Actually, Jen's videos are really very practitioner oriented, and that's why I like her videos a lot, because they're really brief and to the point, and they're for an organization developing their strategic plan. But what I'm really trying to get you to do here this week is to compare John Bryson, Mark Koenig, and Jen Lockman and what they all have to say about mission and vision statements, because they all take a slightly different approach. And that's the point I'm trying to make to you, that there is not just one way of doing strategic planning. There is not just one way of approaching these subjects like a mission statement. So finally, here's what we're going to do this week. I provided you the link to the Durham Museum. Hopefully the link works. If it doesn't, just Google the Durham Museum of Omaha. It's a local nonprofit. And I want you to take some time reviewing their entire website, what they do, what their activities are, what their facilities are, their staff, their events. And you should be able to do that. And then I want you to put yourself in the place of being a member of their team. So now, based on everything you've read in Bryson and Alston, the Bryson excerpt I provided you, Koenig, Lockman, all those sources, I want you to start thinking about, okay, what's the mission of the Durham Museum? And now in the discussion board, I provided you about a 3-part discussion that I want you to participate in. And the conclusion of that discussion really is you assuming you're a member of the Durham Museum and posting an official mission statement and then answering some questions about that. So that's this week, mission statements. And the last pitch I want to put out there is, remember that your term project interview plan is due on October 10th. That's based on the questions we worked on and discussed this last week, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. So that's it for this week. Thanks for viewing, and I'm looking forward to the discussion on mission statements. Thank you.